Hey everyone, welcome to my most recent episode of Ag Uncensored with your host, me, Nathan Felighty here. I got Michael Ott here today, who I actually kind of just we were going to plan on doing a podcast regardless, but I've been sick this week and I had to cancel someone else, and so I messaged Michael last minute, literally a few hours ago, as I'm doing this, and here we are, and he's available. And so while it was the plan, we're just doing a little earlier. But anyways, Michael, thanks for that and coming on. You've had a nice little storied past, and maybe more recently in ag tech, doing a bunch of stuff. But before we get into that, why don't you tell everybody about who you are, what you do, how you got into ag and the tech side, and whatever else. The
Sounds
board is
good. Thanks
yours.
for having me. I'm really happy this worked out because you're right. We had planned on doing it. It just popped up a little sooner than anticipated. So
Yeah.
that's wonderful. Uh, right now, I'm the CEO of Sequestra. We harness the power of plants to push roots deeper and store carbon underground. So that's using gene editing technology based out of the Salk Institute in San Diego. And we are bringing this into commodity crop agriculture, where we'll use that gene editing technology, push roots deeper. That'll help plants tolerate stress, and then like a drought. And then we can also generate carbon credits for farmers with no change in their agronomic practices. So that's pretty exciting. Most recently, before this, I founded Rantizo. That's the nation's largest drone spraying company. So Rantizo is in about 35 states now, rocking and rolling, doing really well. We're excited about all the opportunities that are happening there. It seems like drone application is really becoming way,
Mm-hmm.
way more common than when I started the company 6 years ago. And then to answer your first question about how I got into ag, I grew up in a small town in Iowa. We had a restaurant, so we weren't technically on the farm, but the majority of our clientele was on the farm, and everybody that went to a very small Catholic high school was on the farm. So I got to go out and bale hay and help out with them. So I was affiliated with it, but not directly there, and just got to know how to talk to people and understand what was going on and what was important, what mattered. And so it was really interesting to see all those things that I learned early on growing up. Got a chemistry master's degree, and then ended up helping people do some fundraising for ethanol and biodiesel plants because
Okay.
I had worked for a hedge fund right out of grad school. So I knew about finance, I knew about science, and then harkening back to all those conversations I had with many, many, many farmers, I could talk to them as well. So kind of could bridge the gap between all those different universes.
Well, that's yeah, quite a bit to do there. So, um, what I remember when you first started kind of the Rantizo thing. It's kind of funny because I remember you probably didn't know it was me at the time. I don't know if it was on Twitter or on something else. Maybe it was Ag Talk or something. You're kind of talking about the spraying stuff, and naturally all the drone stuff was kind of a craze for a while, and a way to get into it. And you guys are kind of the first to kind of maybe more push the spraying thing, and naturally that's a big kind of barrier when you got aerial applicators and all the retailers doing their own spraying, and trying to match up to that. So kind of with that landscape, what made you decide to get into drones and then spraying? Like, what was the
Sure.
kind of the step up to that?
Yeah, so I used to do corporate venture capital. So we had funding from Monsanto, Novozymes, and Bunge to do early stage agriculture and energy investments, and started a company that I actually deployed in India. It was a biological seed treatment for rice. So it put a tiny amount of nitrogen on a rice seed at the exact right moment. It was naturally sticky, it was natural, everything else. It was a
Mm-hmm.
great idea. That one had an unusual exit. That's a better story for a beer, but ended up giving me enough money to kind of think about what's the next thing to do. And with that technology, I could put nitrogen on rice at the right time, and that was perfect. But only that input, only that crop.
Sure.
And I was thinking about how do I do it in a in any crop at any time. And drone application was this like 2017, 2018. So drones were pretty small, pretty unreliable at those times. But I
Hmm.
thought they were getting better, and that's the type of thing that improves rapidly. So kind of had that core of an idea about, you know, just doing the right amount at the exact right moment. In
Sure.
2017, 2018, not many people were talking about that then,
Yeah.
so we kind of got ahead of the game there.
Well, and what was always kind of, for me, I always thought, I mean, you would see it even in movies. I can't remember what movie it is. It was a futuristic movie, and there was someone actually farming, and they hit the button, and it sprayed drones. It was
Yeah, there was
also like a post apocalyptic. I'm gonna just murder that word.
you're good.
uh, yeah, there was a world war of sorts going on, and
Yeah.
anyways, but now it's actually been getting to reality, and some farms even are buying their own, and of course there's still some challenges, but I've actually been kind of surprised over the last, yeah, I suppose 2 years. It's just kind of really launched up into more realistic realms. What's done that? What's made that possible more so than
Uh,
like the early days?
I think it's the reliability of the drone, and people are realizing there are certain times where a drone is way better to do an application than a tractor. There's many other times that a tractor is way better than a drone. So it's just like
Hmm.
another tool in your toolbox, and finding that opportunity and then deploying it the right time, the right moment, using that tool. So, Purdue does that study every year in terms of intentions of, what ag retailers are going to buy, and the numbers, I'm pretty close on these. It was like 19% of ag retailers had had drones or intended to, and they plan to go up from 33 to 55% over the next couple of years. So like half of all our ag retailers are going to have some sort of drone application operation. So that's the thing that people are seeing. I can make money doing this. And the same thing with
Well,
Sequestra. Like, you can talk about the carbon angle and everything else there, but ultimately you have to make money doing those
yeah.
things. And once you can do that, then things really take off. You'll get the early adopters, people that want something cool. We had a
Hmm.
guy early on at Rantizo that he bought a drone to spray in his 1 acre vineyard that he had in his backyard because he thought it was really cool. And he wanted us to come set it up. All he wanted to do was click the button. And
Hmm.
in 2018, 2019, that was a pretty tall ask because
Yeah.
we're still
Yeah.
getting it all figured out. However, now, with Rantizo, we've done almost 200,000 acres of application last year. So a wide range of crops, wide range of settings, everything else, all those things are tracked and it's known. So then like, oh, how do you spray this fungicide on wheat? How do you do a cover crop application, around the river bend? How do you do that? And
Hmm.
like, okay, we've got data on all those things. So you can do that. And it's the power of a network effect that has really
Sure.
come together. So now with our software that's coming out, the ability to do Acre Connect, where you can, if you've got a need for an application, get on, it's geotagged. So if we have somebody close by, you can order that up. And those things are interesting and able to actually work now. A funny story about the setup of that, early on, someone said, hey, let's put together a website. If somebody wants an application by drone, we can set it up. So we put it out there. It's like,
Sure.
this is awesome. Easy to do on the web, super great. We had like 85 hits in the first week, and two of them are things that we could have feasibly done. And realized, okay, there's a lot of demand for this,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
we cannot service that in 2019. And now we're getting pretty good, especially with geotagging and everything else, and knowing where things are. But it's just everything improves as you do it over time.
Well, and what's been well, I think it's been good to see some of the drone spraying having some success here, because clearly there's been other things in ag tech that haven't. Even the drone side with taking imagery, like that
Mm-hmm.
was always a it was always kind of a weird. I have a love-hate relationship with drones, because being from the satellite imagery world, when they started kind of flooding in 14, 15, I mean, there was, I mean, heck, we had some contracts with some big input suppliers and bigger groups, and then like all of a sudden, it just because of the marketing maybe pitch, it was like overnight. It's like, well, no, we'll get all our imagery from drones, and then it was in papers and the news, like national news type stuff
Mhm.
talking about it, and it's like, well, yeah, they fit in the right spot, but if you want XYZ, you have to use the right thing, and that just yeah, like I said, a love hate, but I always knew it always has a place because and one of the areas I always thought was the spraying side. Of course, there's like you said, there's all the other challenges, the amount of liquid and how it's actually applied. Even the how the air pushes down is different than a plane. It's different than a helicopter. There's all those things. Um, and then just, I mean, the right to fly a drone with all the rules and regulations, that was its own challenge. But the one area I mean, when I farmed and know my friends and family that farm, I mean, when you actually look at a field, there's not weeds or disease everywhere. I mean, sometimes it's spread, a lot, depending on how long you skipped from doing something about it. But I always thought, I was like, okay, let's get, or even with the camera side, let's get drones to fly where they should instead of where they shouldn't. And I mean, I know there's broad application on the spraying side, but I always thought it's like, okay, with like fungicide maps who do with satellites, it's like we only need them in the high vegetative areas. Just fly there, just do those areas, and then you don't have to cover all the field. You don't have to run a $500,000 sprayer up and down and waste a
Mhm.
bunch of chemical and time. I think
Yeah,
it's
we're
getting there. Is it to that point yet, or is just people are kind of afraid of that more
yeah.
site specific spraying? I guess.
I'll never forget a conversation I had with a guy. It was at an ag retailer event, and I said, "You can use a drone and just spray a portion of the field." And he's like, "Look, what do you mean? Like you only spray part of? Why would anyone only ever spray part of the field? Like spray the whole damn thing." And it's like, well, this is again 2019, 2020, and that was a revolutionary concept to some people. And
Yeah.
now people are grasping, yes, absolutely, you should maximize your input costs in terms or optimize your input costs by just spraying where things are needed. And it comes down
Yeah.
to a system approach. And that's, I think,
Hmm.
where we were successful at Rantizo, and that's what we're trying to build at Sequesta, is like understanding the system where it's not just a drone, it's the trailer, the reloading device,
Hmm.
insurance, permitting, support, and now software where it's just we've got to get an as applied map and an as covered map. So
Yeah.
I applied on 13 of these 60 acres. So I've got precisely where that was applied. I've covered 60. So then you can kind of figure it out from there. But making all those systems work, that's what I found is my specialty is, okay, here's a problem. Let's find a technology that works and then put the system around it so everyone up and down the value chain can benefit from that. And that's what we're trying to do at Sequestra.
Well, and yeah, I mean, it might be a good segue into it, that part, because I mean, we could talk about drone spraying probably for the next entire hour too, which I mean, I like I said, I still find fascinating, and I've dabbled with a few. There was a group this fall. They were wanting to build one that lifts 1,000 pounds,
Mm-hmm.
and can do basically the same amount of work as a aerial applicator, but I mean they're very expensive, and the mechanics of it get quite extensive. And overall, but yeah, to your point, like why that ag retailer was like, why you just spray the whole field? I suppose that's the other problem with some of the more site specific drone spraying is, well, ag retailers want to sell more chemical because they make a lot of money off that too, so they want to spray the whole field.
Well, exactly. And it's understanding the system that you're in. And yeah, an ag retailer that's going to make more money spraying the whole field, that's what they'll do. Can you upcharge and then, actually show the farmer that there's value in doing this and save your time, have the ability to once again spray 13 of those 60 acres, and then I'll do this 60, that 60, boom, 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 and I'm actually knocking out more territory as you go. And that's where I think that systems point of view of what we're trying to do now at Sequesta is like understanding our edits, and then how does that fit in a agricultural uh, channel to market that can really make economic sense for the seed companies, the ag retailers, and the farmers, and the carbon buyers that are getting it at the end too. So that's where my head is right now.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll skip away from drone spraying for now, as now you're on to your next kind of venture, and then I'll walk into that, and then I think maybe we can walk into kind of just the whole generalities of ag tech and your thoughts and experiences and how it's changing, because
Sounds
clearly a
great.
lot is changing. So, but yeah, talk about the Sequesta side a little more, and how you got into that. And it's an interesting novel concept too. It's different
Mhm.
from when we've talked about before, of dealing with kind of the carbon mantra in ag. I mean, there's a lot of ways people are trying to deal with it, from cover crops to sequestration to insets. You know, it's onsets versus insets, all these fun things, government regulations, groups trying it. But there's been issues with it because it's been hard to kind of measure. You know, the MRV side
Yep.
is complicated, and there needs to be more of an approach where it feels more common sense in how someone's sequestering carbon. That's been kind of how I've thought about it. And yeah, so talk about what you're doing more, because I think it can kind of
Sure.
fit into there, because it's
Yeah, that's our
yeah.
our goal is to fit right into the existing systems. So we're doing gene editing of traits, and so we can do root architecture modification. I can change the root to do whatever you want. We're choosing to go with deeper roots because that's universally desirable in agriculture. Helpful in a drought because you can get down lower in the water
Hmm.
table. Helpful in excess rain because that excess rains will wash down nutrients. So we're going deeper. We could go shallower, wider, fatter, narrower, branched, not branched, you name it. So that's what we're doing, just modifying roots to go deeper. And the benefits there are there's additionality because this is a new trait that's going to be in the seed. So technically, there's something new that's needed for the carbon credit. Anything has to be additional. Some
Hmm.
people complain about, if you have been doing cover crops for years, you can't get that credit. If you just started doing it, then that's
Yeah.
additional. Then you do get the credit. So everything that we're doing is additional. So that's really helpful. But then, other than that, we don't want to change anything else at all in the system. So that's where I think a lot of these carbon programs have failed in they're asking for a whole bunch of changes for a
Yeah.
credit that's not very deep and not very valuable. So it's like do $25 to $40 worth of work for $5 to $10 of carbon credit. That
Yeah.
doesn't make much.
Share all this data, that 10 years worth of data on your APH
Yep.
history, which
Yes.
I don't know many farmers that like to share their APH history, because that's like the actual yield that they want to
Yes.
keep
Yeah.
away from everybody, but that's what some require. And
Yeah.
I mean, the other point where I think it's kind of interesting in how you're approaching it is you're going after kind of more of the gene side. So it's multiple crops, and it also is not just about sequestering carbon, like you said. It put the roots down deeper, and that's been I mean, some crops, sunflowers, which are growing a lot up here, their roots go super deep.
Hmm.
They'll also suck the water out of the whole entire field, but they'll get some of that deep water. Some of those taproot type things. Corn will go deeper, but wheat stays up here. So I think it's interesting where if you can balance it for
Yep.
where that field needs it, even if it doesn't have to do with sequestering, just water use, or nitrogen efficiency, things of
Yep.
that. You can start site specific, putting different varieties where the roots go different places. I mean, that's probably a little ways away, but uh,
Yeah, we're thinking along the exact same lines. So, yeah, our view is, get the seeds into the seed company, we'll license to them. They do those deals all the time, and
mhm.
then distribute through the normal channels. And then the farmer will just plant as they always have. And we'll need a tiny amount of data to say, basically, I bought this seed, the seed has the trait, I've planted it and harvested it. Like that's all that I care about. I'm not getting into yield. I'm not getting into data selling business. I don't
Hmm.
want to mess around there. I need like verification that you had the seed and it was in the ground and it actually grew. Like that's all that we care about. So
Well, and
we
that's
don't
pretty
want to
similar to how people have dealt with it with Roundup traits
exactly.
and stuff like that,
Yep.
anyways. So that's a pretty
Yep.
normal. It's a pretty normal ask, and I think anything in the ag tech space, that's something maybe that wasn't done as much, and let's say more recently, is making it just not a barrier to do things as normal. Because some of these things you have to change like everything about it, like you said on the carbon side.
Mhm.
Traditionally, how it's been, if you can add technology in ways where farmers don't even know they're really doing it, but they see multiple benefits from, traditionally that works.
Yep. Yeah, we had one of our new investors, like, we really like transformational technologies. Like, how are you transforming agriculture? It's like, we're deliberately not. We are going through the traditional seed selling channels to farmers as they always have, because if I'm asking someone to do a whole sort of new thing, that hurts your adoption and hurts your scale.
Yeah.
And we're trying to solve a giant problem here. And it's very challenging to ask people to change practices. I do have a good stat at the beginning of our presentation where we talk about nature absorbs and releases about 750 gigatons of carbon each year. Humans emit about 40 gigatons of carbon. So if I want to solve for excess carbon in the atmosphere, I can either convince every human to use half as much, eat half as much, drive half as much, 50% reduction, or I can make nature 2.5% more efficient. So I think it's
Hmm.
much more likely that we make nature more efficient than get every single person in the world to use half as much of all the products that they use. Like that's never going to happen. So we want to make
Yeah.
tiny changes to giant markets and scale through that. And that's where I think the true value play will come in.
Well, I mean, that playbook is basically what the major providers have done, especially with seed genetics anyways, is that's how you change some of those things. Most of you could call it, pollution and things like that are caused by what they say, like the top 100 largest companies in the world. Well, if you want to change them, you need to come out with things that work with their systems that do that change, that are also not barriers to how they do business.
Yep. And
And
everyone
yeah,
at every step has to make money. Like that's the seed company has to make money,
capitalism. Yeah.
the ag retailer does, the farmer. So that's the system that I'm trying to put together. And we've got some pretty good ways about it where we actually want to license the trait to seed companies, and then we don't want the farmer to pay for it.
Yeah.
It just isn't one more trait that they can add in at that seed purchase time. And then with that free trait, probably labeled deep root / carbon sequestration, I think that'll really help with adoption. And then as we get, the initial value of the carbon that we get is going to be fairly low. But, if you're paying zero for something and you get $2, per acre, great. If you get 8, 12, 15, 30, even better. Obviously, I want that number to be as high as possible. But I think early on, if we can get this out there at no charge to the farmer, and then when the carbon is sold at the end, kind of pay them back through the system, that'll just kind of build on itself, because what we're learning in the measurement reporting verification is that what we can prove after 1 year is going to be a fraction of the total amount of carbon that's there. So I might
Hmm.
only be able to pay 10%, 30% of the total amount that's in there. But in years 2, 3, 4, 5, okay, those checks are going to keep coming in. And then as you plant more crops, you'll kind of stack this on top of each other. So ultimately, it'll pay back pretty nicely. And I think farmers will really appreciate, not paying anything for that up front. And I think that's kind of a different model because, most people do that 2 to 1, 3 to 1 type of ratio of
Hmm.
I'm creating $30 in value. I can charge $10 for it. So it'd be hard for us to do that early on with our, just adding $1 per bag of seed or whatever it may be. And yeah, it's $3, but all right, that'll be hurting with adoption, I think.
Yeah. So how will that translate? Because just in my head, thinking, when other seed companies have added whatever trait, it's another $10 for this stack, another $10 for this stack. I could see them wanting to do that, like, oh, we're going to add another $10 because now this sequestering part. So they might do that, or is that something that you're trying to kind of steer them away from through the licensing package, or do you not really care how they do that in a sense? How does that work?
I have pretty strong feelings. I wouldn't say never, but we have pretty strong feelings that this is going to be the best monetization system for every entity along the chain. We could charge for it more. The thing about the deep roots is they will very likely really pay off in times of stress.
Mm-hmm.
So we don't necessarily think there's going to be a huge yield benefit to it, but there will probably be reduced yield loss. So when there's a
Sure.
drought and you lose 10 bushels, you might only lose 5. So that's a harder thing to charge for too, because it's like, well,
Yeah.
how much money did I save you versus money that I gained you? That's just a different mentality. So that's how we're looking at it, and we're pretty tightly affiliated to this because ultimately it's going to make the best for everyone involved, and we can capture way more value on the backside, and also get those benefits to the farmers of, we're seeing more stress. There's more climate change. There's more issues. And whether you
Mm-hmm.
believe in it or not, you can see it everywhere. You can see warmer temperatures. You see less rain in a lot of areas. You see more rain in certain spots. So it's really interesting. Uh, when I had a year in between Rantizo and Sequesta, I had to travel quite a bit, and I wasn't planning on it, but I happened to go to a bunch of places where the effects of climate change were really, really obvious. I went down to Antarctica. I saw a spot that had 35 feet of ice that was
Mm-hmm.
now bare ground. So in the last 40 years, 35 feet of ice have disappeared from that spot.
Great.
I saw a
Awesome.
place in Europe that there were ski lifts and everything. And they said, "Oh yeah, we don't have a mountain anymore. We don't have
Yeah.
skiing anymore. We have the mountains obviously there, but we don't get enough snow." So the ski lift was built like in the 60s or 70s. There's not enough snow there anymore to make that work. So
Yeah.
whether you like it or not, those things are happening. So we don't debate that. We don't fight with people about it, but we're going to solve this problem and keep working that.
So, you're trying to do this through the gene editing process. Are you dabbling into ways on other ways to get roots deeper, thicker from even like the biological side, or other methods? Because some crops are not going to be gene edited just because of what they are and whatnot. But I'm assuming you're looking at some other methods of implementing the same thing.
Absolutely. So the measurement reporting verification MRV system that can be used for any deep rooting technology. If it's a microbial application, if it's an additive, whatever you're doing, we can quantify that, and we're actually talking to a range of groups about being their verification partner, just so they can monetize appropriately. So that is something that we're designing our system to be able to enable others to use. We're looking specifically at gene editing and specifically in commodity crops because it's a moderate amount of work with a gigantic payout because of the
Mm-hmm.
scale of commodity crops. So we'll start with covercress, then we'll go to soybeans and canola. So we'll learn some things in a smaller crop, covercress, figure out a lot of stuff out there, get kind of the systems working, and then go to soybeans and canola. And then the plan is to move on. We're not super focused on any specialty crops just because of the pure acreage. I had a
Yeah,
good
that
chat.
makes
Someone
sense.
was asking me about, do you want to do tomatoes? And I I know these numbers, but there's 300,000 acres of tomatoes in the United States. In one county in Iowa, there's 99 counties in Iowa. There's 300,000 acres of corn. So like we could go all the work, do everything in tomatoes, everything else, and have this tiny, tiny opportunity, or we could get into corn and hundreds or thousands of times more opportunity there.
Yeah, I mean, I could see some other. I mean, there's certain other crops like, well, I mentioned sunflowers earlier. There is some gene editing there. It's a little
Mm-hmm.
different. Sugar beets, that's another area. And that's a decent size and it's a high value crop. But yeah, you can't touch everything, and that's okay as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And
There's
we'll
plenty
be
to grab.
doing, yeah, we'll be doing gene editing, which is different than gene modification. Maybe to explain for the audience, gene
Yeah,
editing is taking a trait from one version of a soybean and putting it into an elite soybean. So you've got a natural thing that's there moving along. It's indistinguishable from natural breeding. You could have done it by just combining those two plants
sure.
together. It's a much faster way to do it. You can shave years off your production. Uh,
Is that using some of the like the CRISPR
exactly.
methods? Okay.
Exactly. Yep. And then gene modification is taking a trait from any source and then putting it in a
Yeah.
crop. So it's something from a jellyfish going into a soybean, something from a herbicide resistant insect, or sorry, resect, insecticide resistant insect, putting that into corn, and then that's how you get BT and other things like
Well, and that's what has scared the world, especially like
that.
Europe and other places. So yeah, I do see the CRISPR method is, I mean, it's still anything you say gene whatever scares certain people. Although it just still makes me, I almost you have to laugh about it with, with some of those methods, people don't want it. And then, think of COVID and all the vaccines that came out, and they're using all these newer methods. And then, but you have people that are totally for, you know, changes in gene editing, farmers that are then scared of maybe vaccines or something, and vice
Yeah.
versa from the environmental side. Oh, we don't want this, but we want this. And beyond getting into the pure politics of it, you just have to laugh at it almost just because of
I don't
the
want to
back
get
and
into
forth.
politics, but one of my favorite stories. So this was during the election. Was I think it was in Michigan. Somebody was ahead, and they were saying stop the count, stop the count, and so everybody wanted to put the count to stop. And then somebody else was ahead in Arizona, and they're like, we got to count all the votes. We got to count the votes. So like, wait a minute.
Yeah, which one is it?
You want to stop or accelerate depending on who's winning, and so you have no principle there. It's just
Well,
who do we want to win. So
you're gonna
those things
piss.
happen all the time, and we choose not to get involved in it. It just sometimes got to take a step back and laugh.
Well, and it's possible you're probably just what we were doing at some point in time. Hopefully not, that you'll piss some environmental group off or some sort of group, and just like, well, it is what it is. You just have
Yep.
to deal with the science, and here's the
Yeah,
science.
I think if you're moderately ticking many groups off, that means you're doing pretty well. Like if somebody's absolutely outraged,
Yeah,
all right, then maybe they have a point. But if everyone is slightly miffed, you're probably on a pretty good path. So, because people are generally happy with the status quo, so you gotta change just enough to not make them too angry.
yeah. Well, and in any method, or any way, I think more approaches like you're trying to do here is kind of maybe what others in ag tech, or dealing with anything in tech, because I mean, I've dealt more on software, you've done some of that, or the drones. Now you're getting into the gene side. Like you just gotta be really smart about how you are applying that to the whole production system. And that's maybe what many have thought they were doing. They've come out with something and said, oh yeah, this will work everywhere. It's like, well, yeah, that doesn't work everywhere. And if you try to say it works everywhere, then you get yourself in trouble. So you're not saying it works everywhere currently. So that's, I think, you're
No,
going
there
after where
could
you
be.
need to go after.
Yeah, there'll be certain situations where this is excellent, and you make a beachhead in that
Mm-hmm.
market and show that, yep, this is going to be a better way to do it, and then you expand from there. So we did that at Rantizo, land and expand strategy. Yep, these are the things in, commodity crop fungicide application in rainy areas. Like, okay, a drone is really good when it rains a lot at the end of July and you're
Yeah.
trying to spray fungicide in corn and soy and you can't get in the field.
Yeah.
So that's a great opportunity, and that's kind of where we started. Now we've got hubs set up in different parts of the country where we're doing some pasture land spraying, we're doing some specialty crop spraying in the Pacific Northwest. All those things kind of come together and like, yep, this is fundamentally better in this situation, and then we find more and more situations where that is. Same thing at Sequestra, returning soybeans. Like there's going to be benefit for the people that plant it in certain situations. Like there's a lot of climate stress around you. All right, this is going to be a better way to do it. And then we kind of expand from there.
Well, and I see just from my, like we were saying earlier, my variable rate application routes of things. I mean, I've been kind of surprised some of the multi-hybrid, multi-variety planting hasn't taken off as far as I thought. But of course, there's a data play and data side to that.
Yep.
But in a sense, if it was tied more to more knowledge on what's actually happening with those varieties, say what kind of what you're doing, it's like, hey, these roots are going down here. I could maybe check off that other box too. That's just kind of that extra benefit
Yeah,
of like, hey, okay, this area, this this low lying area, it's got heavier vegetation, but there's more water there. Yeah, we can. This variety really pushes deep and soaks up a lot of water here because there's excess. Where top of a hill, you might not even put that type of variety there because it's or maybe you need it to go deeper because to get the water. I mean, I guess it depends on the lay of the land, soil types, and all that. But
we were just at Bex and they showed us they're making these root boxes which are really, really cool. So it's gravel, kind of like what's on a baseball field. Like you grow the
sure.
plant in that, and it
Mm-hmm.
grows a whole season, so you get the whole. They put in they fertigate all the nutrients in and everything else, so it grows just like normal. And then you can pull the sides away, and all the soil, the gravel parts fall out, so you can just see all the
Oh,
roots that
cool.
are there. It's
Mm-hmm.
really, really cool. It's a phenomenal visualization. They call them root boxes, and it's amazing to see. So they showed us one that was they called it a racehorse, and it was just like if the conditions are right, this corn is going to yield like crazy. It'll be amazing. You can see like a very
Mm-hmm.
narrow root pattern, deep, going into on the edges that going out. And then they had another that was way bushier, like much more lateral roots, and like this is a very safe. It's going to grow well in any conditions, but it's not going to be probably more than 200 some bushels, like in any
Mm-hmm.
stuff. So figuring out those exact same things, like yeah, you put your racehorse here, you put your Toyota Camry here, like that's how it goes, and
Yeah.
you kind of figure those things out. But that gets to what AI can do. Like I think that's more data than humans can process
Yeah. No, I
out
would
there.
agree.
But like that's where understanding all that and then saying, yep, precisely in this spot, which kind of it gets to the same thing I was doing at Rantizo, like precisely what right here, what's the best thing you can do, and then 4 feet away, 20 feet away, 2 miles away, it's a different thing, and then you just optimize for that. So I think those are exciting problems, and I'll keep working on them
Well,
and solve them.
I've even been talking to a few more recently too. Is as like I said, I've kind of been around the more of the kind of the data agronomic side of applying using data and actually making actionable insights in the field. And it's honestly, there's still not enough people that do it, and there's varying reasons for that. I even think in the last called 10 years from the amount of money that has been coming in and all that type of stuff, that we almost kind of got away from some of that stuff because then big data, all this other data, we got to just do something with the data, manage the data better. And so all these tools came out to kind of try to do that, and we almost forgot about what we actually want to do with the data and how we actually want to utilize it and apply it in the field to actually change something.
Mm-hmm.
It's been more of this mantra of, well, let's just get it and put it somewhere, and then we'll kind of combine it, and then we'll just say, here it is. And most people were not actually like doing something with it. I do, though, have this feeling, and just I've heard more and more other people talking about it. I think what you're doing too makes it flows into that. It's like, all right, we've talked about all this shit for the last 10 years of what data is and where it can be placed. Better at it now than we were. Now let's actually do something. Let's actually make a move. Let's bring in these efficiencies. Let's make it easier for farmers. To your point, maybe AI can help on that because there's so much data.
Mm-hmm.
And like a post I did earlier today, it was kind of, the frustrations with software. Well, probably one of the biggest things that can help just with software adoption and usage is just to make it easier for a random person to go in there, say what they want, type what they want, like you can kind of do in ChatGPT now, and it gives you what you want. You don't have to press all the buttons in the software. You don't have to do all the things. You're like, just do it for me. And
Mhm. Yeah. I'm from Dyersville, Iowa, which is where Field of Dreams was filmed. So, the line from the movie, if you build it, they will come.
mhm,
That's what people are doing with data and a lot of things in agriculture. We're just going to build this and people come in. That works in movies, but doesn't really work well in real life. You've got to add value, and that's where a lot of times, I was looking at companies doing this, 5, 10 years ago. Of it's $15, $20 worth of data processing and inputs and everything else, and we might get you another bushel. So it's like, oh, I spent $20 to get
yeah,
5, and you wonder why investment is drying up. And those things don't make sense. But now the processing is cheaper, the insights are more. Maybe you're
yeah,
spending $3 to get 5 or 8 or whatever it is, and that's where we've had a fair bit of success fundraising here. Actually, one of the reasons I'm excited for the timing on this is
yeah,
we've announced a $6 million seed round, which is a pretty good sized seed round, and
yeah.
we're
I would
very
say
very
that's
excited to
bigger
do
than a
that.
seed. That's like a
Yeah,
plant round. I think you've got the plant to grow a little bit. No one's
exactly.
going to change the name to that, but I'm just
Yeah.
throwing it out there.
But
But
doing it in this environment, this is a really difficult fundraising environment, and
mhm,
it's pretty fantastic to get support from quality investors and have the team growing, and then we're looking to hire people for our plant transformation group that's being built up in St. Louis. So really excited about what's happening here at Sequesta.
so, well, I mean, clearly you're on that side of it, on the early stages of it, because anything gene changes in plants is, as we all know, they're fairly spendy ventures to get in, and that's where actually, there's been a lot of, you could say, crap thrown on VCs in the ag tech world. I've done it plenty myself, but there's always a fit for them too, for bigger, bigger things that just need more because they're bigger processes and ideas. It fits too. So,
Yeah,
and
and like
I guess talking about, yeah, how what's your kind of overall thoughts on where that world is? Because you've been dealing with the investment side, like how that sits, like because so much has changed just in the last year.
well, I think there's a really big disconnect with farmers are used to very slow returns, patiently waiting out things, grinding on 2 to 5% per year, having a negative year every so often, hopefully not too frequently,
Hmm.
and then just build slowly, slowly, slowly. And the VC model of making 10 bets, 7 of them are zeros. And, one or two are huge, one or two, make their money back or something else. That's kind of just different mindsets. And I know I was talking to, it was an early stage ag VC, like smart people, but they had someone on their investment committee of like volunteers, and he was a controller at a small manufacturing facility. And he's like, don't you have any like low risk, high return investment opportunities? Like, no, that's
That's not
if
how
you
ag
had that, you
works.
would go to a bank and like that's not early stage VC. Like that, so it's just like a mentality of, well, it's a different mindset. So that's where I think you need all of them. I mean, frankly, you need these software things that are going to pay off in a big way with very little scaling costs. You need, and the other thing in agriculture is ultimately you're moving stuff. Like you're moving a
Hmm.
seed, you're moving a fertilizer, you're moving a chemical. It's got to get manufactured somewhere. It's got to get delivered somewhere. It's got to get sprayed, applied, planted, whatever it is. So when you're in the stuff moving business, there's hardware and everything else, and people don't like to invest in that, especially
Yeah.
on the VC side because it's hard to do. So like most of those investments are software to make the stuff moving go better, and that's how it goes.
Well,
This
they
is
want
something.
the copy. It's kind of the, we make it once and then we can copy it a million times and
Yeah,
charge the same amount. And I suppose you can, in a sense, do that for the gene side of things that you're doing, and that's where it's kind of a
yeah. Well,
more of a
finding
novel
any
approach to making money.
Yeah,
for
they're called genome-wide association studies. So I can find, the common gene in canola and soybean and Arabidopsis and other things, and like, okay, what I found there, I can do and move on to the next one. But I was going to tell the story of when I was doing corporate VC, and someone would come in and say, we're the Amazon of ag chemicals, we're the Uber of farm equipment. I was like, oh, you're telling me you don't have a unique idea. You're just applying someone else's idea to a new market, a new vertical. And so, like,
yeah,
all right, you can do those things, but that's not really truly innovative. And those businesses can work and they're fine, but they're not going to be like a monster that's going to get a huge, huge return. So that's where you've got to think a little bit more outside the box.
yeah. I mean, naturally, like every industry, ag has had challenges, especially lately. Is someone creates something, gets a little traction, and then you get like 20, 30 copycats of doing variations of the same, and to me that's always been, I mean, it's a natural thing of business. It's
Mhm.
expected, if anything. But what I see is always, I the hard problems are the hard problems for the hard reasons they are, and those the people that go after those things, that's what separates, I think, kind of they call it the men from the boys in
Mhm.
the ag sector. So if you don't
Yeah,
go after some of those big questions, those harder things, um, you can't set your own stage for bigger success if you just kind of create the same thing everybody else has done. There's variation to that, but
no, I see that completely. And sometimes when people copy my ideas or I see them copying things, like it burns you a little bit, makes you mad, like, oh, they're just copying what we're doing. But it is a little compliment too of, oh yeah, you're like literally trying to do the same business that we started 6 years ago. Okay, like that's great. I'm
yeah.
glad that it's been proven out, and uh, it's kind of fun to be there early.
Well, nothing wrong with competition too. It kind of
Yeah,
lights a
yeah.
fire under your ass and gets you going. And what is good, and I've noticed this even from the imagery side, because now there's like hundreds of people that deal with it on with satellites and whatnot, is you get others in, they do start innovating in different ways that you weren't even expecting. Like, oh well, actually that's a good way to go about that, or that's a different niche that you couldn't handle, but they applied some of the same tech. So you got to kind of be mindful of of that at times too, which
Yeah,
is
we're pretty
hard.
open in terms of partnerships. I've always been that way because, thinking that it's generally better to have other bigger groups along with you. If people want to partner with you, it shows that you're doing something right. If you have to go alone, you're probably not on to like a really big game changing idea. So we're looking for carbon partners at Sequesta, groups that want to do some forward purchases. What we're seeing is a lot of these CPG companies, a lot of the food
Sure,
companies,
makes sense.
they've made public pledges about we're going to reduce our carbon emissions, and frankly, the majority of them have no idea how they're going to hit those
Yeah,
targets.
yeah,
So the ability to use a deep root trait that will lower the carbon intensity of many of their feedstocks can be really, really advantageous. So
yeah.
that's the type of things that we're looking for, groups that are trying to partner up on that side. Obviously, farmers, that want to do trials. We got a lot of people that reach out, and we're still building that network. So excited for when we've got a lot of products for them to be able to try. And then we've got a full seed round, but you're always looking for new investors and trying to see what other opportunities may pop up.
Yeah, for anyone listening out there that has a lot of money, Michael's looking for always going to be looking for probably more money because he's dealing with gene editing.
Yeah,
So
it's expensive.
it's
Expensive.
expensive. It just
Yeah.
is. So
Mhm.
what's the, I mean, with it, what's the timetable of some of these things actually getting out to market,
Yeah,
like
we're
at
probably
scale, or at somewhat of scale?
two years away from getting some cover crop seeds out that have been edited, and then probably 3 to 5 years away from your commodity crops, soybeans and canola. And so you're not in Canada, but you're close. So I'm heading up to the Agritech Venture Forum in Toronto because we're going to do some work in canola. And I think given what's happening in Canada in particular, there's a really good opportunity there where they've got a lot of canola. They're forward thinking
Yes.
on the carbon markets, and now
Yeah.
their government just announced a program where they'll be buying carbon credits. So all those things coming together, it's like, oh, we might be spending a little more time up north. So I
Well,
wouldn't be
I used to
close
live
to
in
you.
the canola capital of the United States in
Mhm.
northern North Dakota. So
All right.
you'll have to come up here again. I think you've been up here a few times in different
Oh yeah.
rooms,
Well, there's a
but
big wrestling tournament in Fargo that I would go with my son
oh
and
yeah,
brother.
that's right. So
Yeah. So
yeah,
it's all good time.
just come here during this winter was mild, but yeah, come during the summer.
Oh, I grew up in Iowa. No, we're all fine here. We can get through some snow and ice.
Yeah,
That's the,
you get our weather once in a while in spurts. So
yes.
uh, and it's funny. I think you maybe mentioned it before. You said you were from Dyersville, and that's where the National Farm Toy Museum is too. I was there with my boundary stuff, showing off my play rugs to all the kids, and
Oh yeah.
it's always fun going back to Dyersville. I've been there a few times and seeing all yeah,
Yeah.
that side of it.
We
So,
we served a lot of food. We had a restaurant, so when the farm toy show would come in, we were very, very busy. That was a big deal. So yeah, always good. They had a couple shows per year, and always fun to see. All right, this is. It amazed me at the time, not realizing it, all the differences in the little thing, the things you can put on a tractor with the lift arms and that
oh yeah,
everything else. It's people love it. It's very
I
interesting.
I've even thought in my head because some of the people that build customized farm toys and all that, it's like there's so much passion and intricacy in building these things and planning for some of them. We need like some of those people to transfer into ag tech to use that same kind of mindset in. Be like
Yeah.
just really get into the weeds and all that.
Mhm.
But um, well, I know I said earlier this might be a little shorter one uh, podcast because I have to run, even though it's a Friday and all that. And we got a few more minutes. What are some other? I mean, from just the larger scope of things, because you've been in you've seen a lot in the ag tech side in the last umpteen years. What are some other things that are exciting you in kind of the space, even though we're kind of in a weird lull? What are some things that are exciting you, and what are some things that maybe you'd like to see change a little bit? Because there's a need for changing some of the processes too.
Yeah, I think the systems level integrations, those things I think are really interesting. And you see somebody like a Leaf being able to just make it work for everyone. Like that
Yeah.
technology is really cool. And like everyone has that need, connect APIs. And I know enough to be dangerous there, but those things are really interesting and appealing. Things that kind of work with the existing products and make
Mm-hmm.
them better, that's pretty exciting to me. And then I think on the biologic side, it's really interesting how there's gigantic improvements sometimes. And then learning, why did it happen? Where can we put it out? How can we make it more frequent successes? And then those opportunities are pretty exciting. Throwing data at it, throwing variable rate application or variable
Mm-hmm.
location application, all those things like that's pretty exciting there. So those are the things that pop to mind of stuff that's interesting. So I'm also hopeful that the big groups that have raised a lot of money, we need like a real success there because there's been a lot of junk that has come out.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
so we need something, more along a Blue River-ish type of and climate type of big deal that turns out to be valuable and actually work as opposed to others that have had lots and lots of investment and they're still floundering to find not product market fit, but a product. and
Well, I
that's
think I could name exactly who that is right now.
yeah.
There's a few maybe too, but
Mhm.
no, I'd agree. There is a need for. I mean, I have my own, I guess, thoughts on some of the groups that have made some of those big exits, which some have
Mhm.
changed kind of the nature of things. Some have also changed the nature of things while they maybe shouldn't have never been paid that amount of money after what kind of goes down. It depends, but
No, I
the,
agree. Like, would you pay those prices now? And, a lot of times those are defensive things that, a big acquirer is doing. Like, yeah, it was more expensive, but had they continued to exist and erode our market share,
yeah,
it's ultimately more valuable for them. So a thing that we're looking at Sequesta, adding this trait into a crop and giving, a deep root slash sequestration opportunity that's free, that could change some points in market share of like, oh, I can buy the same thing that I've always bought, but if I have this opportunity to get a deeper root, all right, that's something that I want to try, and people will check that out. And moving market share in the seed business is giant
Oh yeah,
opportunity. Like
that's
$66 billion worth of seeds sold every year. So if you're sliding a percentage point or two from one big company to the other big company, that's substantial dollars. So that's where we think our value will be in terms of how the how this could be marketed.
well. I think you got something on your shoes worth walking towards. So I think you should be good. That's my analogy for the day. I don't know if that makes sense, but and yeah, and at any point, just from being on here, I'll take 1% of the company. Whatever. The
Perfect.
future's good, so
Perfect.
I'll sign the contract tomorrow. But no, I like I said, this one we're running a little short. It'll be under an hour. My first one under an hour, which is maybe where I should be most of the time, because even though I've done ones close to 2 hours, that's a lot for a
It is.
podcast.
Yeah. I'll admit I really enjoyed the one with Carter, but I did listen to it at 1.25 speed because I saw how long it was. So that's
Yeah,
good.
no, so it's a good test to try to hold it in a little bit, but naturally we could probably talk another hour anyways and record the whole thing, because there's plenty to fun things to talk about. But anyways, Michael, thanks for coming on, and we'll kind of close it up. But yeah, thanks for being on my Ag Uncensored podcast, and I think for anyone listening there, yeah, keep track of what he's doing, because it's a different way to think about the carbon credit stuff, and in a more I'd say usable way that people don't see, which sometimes those are the best scalable things that can kind of sit in the background and create value. So I applaud you for going after something different, as we talked, always hard to do.
Well, thank you. And we have a saying that we like to kind of wrap things up with it. At Sequesta, we think carbon is a problem and we're running it into the ground.
That would, I think people would like that saying, because I think people want to run it into the ground in different ways. You're just trying to do it in the positive way that everyone actually wants to. So
Exactly.
so it's like we'll do the underground work. Your subsurface. You won't see the benefits. You won't even know we're there.
Exactly.
We're doing such a good job. You don't even know we're there. So something like that. But anyways, yeah. Thanks again, and we'll definitely, like I said, keep track of what Michael's doing, and hopefully we'll get some questions and some thoughts from after I spread it out, and get other people's thoughts and feelings, which I'm sure will be positive. But you got a long road, but a good road to travel on. So
Thank you. Great seeing you again.
yeah, thanks, Michael, and thanks everyone for listening to this episode, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.